They said the fire took everything, but what if it didn't? For 20 years, Maya Williams lived with the ashes of a tragedy she could never escape. The night her home burned and her baby girl vanished without a trace. Haunted by guilt and unanswered questions, she rebuilt her life piece by fragile piece. Until one ordinary day as a maid in a billionaire's mansion, she found a photograph that stopped her heart cold. The child in that frame looked exactly like the daughter she lost in the fire. But the truth waiting inside those walls would burn far brighter than any flame. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. In 2005, Maya lived on the quiet edge of Portland, in a small rented house with her 1-year-old daughter, Ella. Their life was simple but full of warmth, laughter in the kitchen, lullabies before sleep, and the soft hum of a woman who had learned to find joy in small things. That joy ended with the smell of smoke. At first, Maya thought it came from outside, the neighbors burning leaves again. But when the living room wall glowed orange, her heart stopped. Flames spread like hungry hands across the ceiling. She ran to Ella's crib, wrapping a wet towel around her arms, but the heat pushed her back. Smoke filled her lungs. The air turned black. She screamed for help, but her voice was swallowed by the fire's roar. She stumbled into the rain-soaked night as the roof collapsed behind her. By morning, the house was gone, nothing but char and ruin. Firefighters found no trace of Ella's body. The report called it an electrical accident. With no remains, no proof of survival, they closed the file. Maya never could. She wandered for years through hospitals, church shelters and mental wards, carrying a silence that no one could understand. The smell of smoke lived in her lungs. The sound of Ella's cry replayed in her dreams. Doctors labeled her with trauma, but what she carried was something deeper, the unbearable ache of a mother with no grave to visit. People forgot her story. Maya didn't. Even when her hands trembled from medication and her voice barely rose above a whisper, she still believed that her baby was somewhere, alive. Meanwhile, across the city, Charles Whitmore, a wealthy entrepreneur, and his wife Isabella were celebrating the arrival of a baby girl. After years of failed pregnancies, they had turned to Silver Meadows Adoption Agency, which promised confidentiality and ethical handling. The child they adopted had no known family, only a name on a blank file. They called her Clara. The Whitmore's mansion stood on the outskirts of Portland, tall glass windows, polished stone floors, a life of quiet perfection. Isabella left her job to raise Clara full-time. Charles provided everything money could buy. Neither of them ever spoke about adoption again. They believed it didn't matter, that love was enough to erase the past. Clara grew up adored, unaware that her life had begun in tragedy. And Maya, somewhere in another part of the city, grew older, still waiting for an answer that never came. 20 years later, Maya was a shadow of who she once was. Her back ached. Her hands bore the marks of labor, but her heart had found a thin layer of peace. A local church helped her rent a modest apartment, peeling paint, leaky pipes, but her own. She started taking housekeeping jobs again, one shift at a time. When she saw an ad for a full-time maid position at a countryside estate, she didn't think twice. The pay was fair, and the description said quiet environment. That was all she needed. The mansion was larger than anything she'd ever seen. Marble stairs, crystal chandeliers, and long hallways that echoed with emptiness. It belonged to Charles Whitmore, now a widower, and his 6-year-old son, Liam. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Porter, greeted Maya at the door with a clipboard and a thin smile. "You'll report to me directly," she said curtly. "The boy has special needs, so you keep your distance. Do your work quietly. No questions," Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am." From her first day, she noticed how silent the house was. No laughter, no toys scattered around, no signs that a child lived there. Liam rarely came out of his room. He didn't speak, didn't meet eyes. He simply existed in his own quiet world. Charles, always away on business, drifted through the house like a ghost of authority. Mrs. Porter handled everything with stiff precision. Maya didn't mind. Silence had become her comfort. She cleaned each corner with deliberate care. Every polished table, every folded curtain, a way to bring order to her fractured mind. She didn't expect connection. She was there to earn, to survive. But one morning, while she dusted the corridor, she felt a small presence behind her. She turned, and there was Liam standing barefoot watching her. His expression was blank, curious but calm. Maya froze, unsure what to say. Then she simply smiled and resumed her work, humming softly under her breath, an old tune she used to sing to Ella. Liam didn't move. He just listened. The next day, he was there again, standing in the same spot, silent. Maya kept humming. By the third day, he had moved a little closer. It wasn't much. But for a boy who lived in stillness, it was everything. She didn't know that the small thread forming between them, her song, his silence, would soon unravel the past neither of them knew they shared. Maya quickly learned that silence could speak louder than words. Liam, the boy who once hid behind doors, had started appearing more often wherever she worked. He never spoke, but his eyes followed her carefully, almost studying the rhythm of her movements. At first, Maya ignored it, afraid of breaking whatever fragile trust was forming. She kept her humming soft and steady, never too loud, never too sudden. Then one afternoon, while she was wiping the windows in the sunroom, she felt a tug at her apron. She turned slowly. Liam stood beside her, holding a folded piece of bright blue cloth. He looked at her, then at the cloth, then back at her. Maya smiled. "Thank you," she whispered, taking it gently from his hands. She placed it on the table, pretending not to notice how long he lingered before walking away. From that day, a quiet ritual began. Each morning when Maya entered the living room, a small colored cloth would be waiting on the table, folded perfectly, as if by invisible hands. She never said anything, but she always used it to dust the furniture, humming as she worked. Sometimes she caught a faint reflection of Liam watching her from the hallway mirror, his expression calm, focused. Weeks passed, and the boy's behavior began to change. He smiled occasionally, mimicked small tasks, even followed her from room to room. The other staff noticed, but brushed it off as coincidence. Mrs. Porter didn't approve. "You're here to clean, not play therapist," she snapped one morning. Maya only nodded. She had no intention of arguing, yet deep down she couldn't ignore the connection. Liam didn't speak to anyone else, not his tutors, not the therapist who came twice a week. But with her, something was different. One evening, as rain drummed against the tall windows, Maya was organizing toys in the playroom. Liam sat on the floor with colored chalk, sketching quietly on a blackboard. His drawings were usually simple shapes, circles, lines, messy colors. But that night he drew something else, a woman with long hair holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. Maya stopped mid-movement. The image was hauntingly familiar. Liam looked up and said softly, "She came from the fire." Her body froze. "What did you say, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. He simply added flames in orange chalk behind the woman and then dropped the chalk piece beside him, turning away as if he hadn't spoken at all. The room suddenly felt colder. Maya's hands trembled. The words echoed in her mind. She came from the fire. She wanted to ask more, but the boy had already withdrawn into silence. That night, she couldn't sleep. The sound of rain outside her small staff quarters reminded her of another night, 2 decades earlier, when fire and rain had shared the same sky. Over the next few days, she tried to dismiss it as coincidence. Maybe Liam had heard something from a movie, or perhaps he was repeating words from a storybook. But the unease wouldn't fade. One afternoon, while cleaning Charles Whitmore's office, Maya accidentally knocked a few books off the shelf. As she bent to pick them up, her eyes caught a photo album wedged between two ledgers. It looked old, its edges worn. Curiosity tugged at her. She hesitated, then opened it. The first pages held wedding photos of Charles and his late wife Isabella. They looked young, happy, untouched by time. Further along were pictures of a baby girl, bright eyes, soft curls, a small pink ribbon in her hair. Beneath each photo, the name Clara was written in neat handwriting. Maya's breath caught. Something in that child's face struck a chord deep inside her. The shape of the eyes, the dimple on the left cheek. It felt like looking at a ghost she once held in her arms. She turned the page, her hands shaking. Every photo made the same strange ache pulse stronger in her chest. She whispered, "No, it can't be." Maya closed the album quickly and placed it back exactly where she found it. She stood still for several seconds, trying to calm her racing heartbeat, but the thought refused to leave. That night, while she folded laundry in the corridor, Liam appeared again. He carried a small drawing in his hands, the same woman and baby, this time in pencil. He held it out to her. "She came from the fire," he said again, clearer than before. Maya knelt, her eyes brimming. "Who came from the fire, Liam?" He tilted his head slightly. "My sister," he whispered. Mommy said. The world tilted around her. Maya felt her breath leave her chest. "Your sister?" she repeated, but the boy had already turned and walked away. She sat on the cold floor long after he disappeared, staring at the drawing in her trembling hands. That night, as the mansion slept, she paced her small room, replaying every detail, the girl's face in the album, Liam's words, the drawings, the fire, the sister. It was impossible, yet it all fit too perfectly to ignore. For the first time in 20 years, hope, the very thing she had buried to survive, began to claw its way back up. She didn't yet know that the mansion itself hid the proof she needed, that the photo she'd seen was more than a coincidence, that the fire that had ended one life had secretly begun another. Maya sat down on her bed, gripping the drawing tightly against her chest. The boy had unknowingly spoken the truth she'd been waiting for all her life, and she was finally ready to uncover it. The following morning, the air inside the Whitmore mansion felt heavy, almost watchful. Maya tried to keep her mind on her chores, but every corner of the house seemed to whisper back the same words. She came from the fire. She needed proof. Something solid, not drawings, not memories. Proof that could no longer be denied. That day, while she dusted the living room shelves, she noticed a large vase slightly off-center on the console table. She reached to move it, but as she lifted the base, a frame hidden behind it slipped to the floor with a sharp crack of glass. Maya froze. The photo inside was untouched. She picked it up carefully, brushing the dust from the glass, and her entire body went cold. The picture showed a little girl, about 6, wearing a pink ribbon in her hair. It was the same girl from Charles's photo album, Clara Whitmore. But as Maya looked closer, her breath caught. The eyes, the dimples, the small scar near the eyebrow. She knew that face. She had kissed that face. It was Ella. The room spun around her. She pressed a hand over her chest, barely able to breathe. Tears welled up and blurred the edges of the photo. For years she had convinced herself her daughter was gone, but now here she was, smiling back from behind the glass, living under another name, and then a voice. "Gray," Liam said softly behind her, using the name he'd invented for her. "She's alive." Maya turned slowly. The boy was standing there, his small hand pointing toward the photo. His eyes were calm, too calm for a child. "She's my sister," he added. Maya's lips trembled. "What did you just say?" Liam stepped closer. "Mommy said she came from the fire. Daddy doesn't talk about it." Maya dropped the cloth from her hand. The sentence hit her like a physical blow. Her knees weakened as she sank to the floor, clutching the photo to her chest. Tears streamed freely now, the room spinning as years of grief crashed through her like a wave. Liam stood beside her, confused but gentle, his small fingers brushing her sleeve. "You're crying," he whispered. Maya pulled him close, shaking. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said through sobs. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Everything she'd buried, the fire, the ashes, the smell of smoke, came roaring back, sharper and more real than ever. For years she'd asked what happened to her daughter. Now, for the first time, she had an answer. Her daughter had survived. Later that night, after the house had gone quiet, Maya crept back into Charles's office. Her hands trembled as she opened the same drawer she had seen before. Inside, beneath a stack of old files, she found a folder marked Clara, Adoption. Her pulse quickened. The first page carried the stamp of Silver Meadows Agency, the same agency that had handled all Whitmore adoptions 20 years earlier. She took photos of every document with her phone, names, dates, the faint, smudged signature of the adoption officer. One line caught her eye, found in unsafe domestic environment. No confirmed relatives. A lie. Every word of it. By the time she returned to her quarters, her head was spinning. The name Silver Meadows echoed in her mind. She'd heard it before somewhere, but where? The next day, during lunch, she found her chance. An older maid, Teresa, who had worked there for nearly 15 years, was sitting alone in the side garden. Maya approached carefully. "Can I ask you something?" she began softly. "Do you remember anything about Clara's adoption?" Teresa frowned, glancing around before answering. "All I know is Mrs. Whitmore brought her home suddenly. It happened fast, within days. The agency was called Silver Meadows, I think." But she hesitated. "That place was shut down years ago. I heard rumors. Bad ones." "What kind of rumors?" Maya asked. "Child trafficking." "Illegal adoptions. Falsified records," Teresa whispered. "It was in the papers. People said some children were taken, not given." Maya's stomach turned. She thanked Teresa quietly and walked away, her mind racing. It all fit, too perfectly. The missing child, the fire, the adoption through a corrupt agency. When her shift ended, she returned to her small room, pulled out her phone, and searched for Silver Meadows Adoption Agency. The old articles were still online. Her hands shook as she scrolled. Agency closed after scandal involving missing infants. Dozens of families unknowingly adopted stolen children. She stared at the screen until her vision blurred. That night, she sat in silence, the photo of the little girl resting beside her. The same eyes, the same scar, the same smile. It wasn't a resemblance. It was her. Maya had lost everything once, but she wasn't about to lose the truth. When the morning came, she knew what she had to do. She would confront Charles Whitmore, not with guesses or stories, but with evidence. By evening, she stood outside his office door, clutching the photos and documents she had taken. Her heart hammered as she knocked. Charles looked up from his desk. "Yes, Maya." "I need to speak with you," she said. "It's about your daughter." He frowned slightly, confused but curious. "What about her?" Maya took a deep breath. "I think Clara. I think she might be my child." For a second, silence filled the room. Then laughter, not cruel but shocked. "That's impossible," Charles said. "You're mistaken." "I'm not," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Your son, Liam," he spoke about the fire, about his sister, and the agency, Silver Meadows. It's been exposed for stealing children. "I found your documents, Mr. Whitmore. I saw the photo. She looks exactly like my daughter." Before he could answer, Mrs. Porter appeared in the doorway. "She's been snooping, sir," she snapped. "I warned you she was trouble." Charles's expression hardened. "Is that true?" Maya's throat tightened. "I wasn't snooping," she said. "I was looking for the truth." He stood abruptly. "You're finished here, Maya. Pack your things. You're suspended immediately." Maya tried to speak again, but the words failed her. She turned and walked out, her vision blurred by tears. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, clutching the photograph to her chest. She'd lost her job, her reputation, maybe even her last chance. but she hadn't lost faith. If no one would believe her, she would find proof herself. She reached into her bag and pulled out the small toothbrush she had taken from Liam's bathroom days before, a guilty impulse she hadn't understood until now. Maya opened her phone and searched for a private DNA testing lab. Her voice shook as she spoke to the receptionist. "I need to know if a child named Clara Whitmore is mine." The technician told her to come in the next morning. Maya hung up and stared at the photo one last time. No matter the cost, she was going to uncover the truth. And this time no one, not fire, not lies, not silence, would stop her. The next morning, the city sky was a pale grey, the kind that made the world look colder than it really was. Maya stepped off the bus and stood outside Portland Genetic Diagnostics, a small private laboratory tucked between office towers. Her heart felt heavy but steady. Inside, the receptionist guided her through the process with polite efficiency. Maya handed over her own DNA sample and the small plastic bag containing Liam's toothbrush. The technician didn't ask many questions. He just labeled the items and said, "Results in 5 business days. We'll call you." Maya nodded, murmured a quiet thank you, and left. For the next few days, every minute stretched into an hour. She couldn't focus on anything else. The memory of the fire, the photo, the words Liam had said. She came from the fire. All of it played in her head like a haunting melody. She barely slept. She barely ate. And yet, underneath the anxiety was a new strength, the kind that grows only when you've already lost everything once. On the 5th evening, just as rain began to fall outside her window, her phone rang. "This is Dr. Reynolds from Portland Genetic Diagnostics," the voice said. Maya gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "We have your results, Ms. Williams. Would you like to pick them up in person?" "Yes," she whispered. She arrived within an hour. The technician handed her a sealed envelope and gave a small, sympathetic smile. "Take your time," he said softly. Maya sat on a bench outside, the rain misting her hair, and tore it open. The first line blurred as her eyes filled with tears. Result positive, 99.9% genetic match between Maya Williams and Clara Whitmore. She pressed the paper to her chest, unable to breathe, unable to move. The world around her seemed to go silent, not empty, but full. Her daughter was alive. The child she had buried in her heart for 20 years had lived. For several minutes, Maya sat frozen, crying softly in the rain. Then she wiped her face and whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Maybe to God, maybe to the universe, maybe to Ella. When she finally stood, her decision was already made. She was going back to that mansion, not as a maid, not as a stranger, but as a mother. The next morning, Maya arrived at the Whitmore estate just after sunrise. The gates stood tall and still, the same as always, except this time she wasn't afraid to walk through them. Mrs. Porter answered the door, her face stiff with disapproval. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. "I'm here to see Mr. Whitmore," Maya replied calmly. "It's important." Before Mrs. Porter could argue, a soft voice echoed from behind. "Maya?" Charles stood at the end of the corridor, dressed casually, confusion flickering across his tired face. "What are you doing here?" Maya stepped forward, clutching a folder close to her chest. "I'm here with proof." Charles's eyes narrowed. "Proof of what?" "Of the truth," she said quietly. He hesitated, then motioned her into his office. Mrs. Porter followed reluctantly, arms crossed. The air inside the office felt charged, as though the walls themselves were listening. Maya placed the envelope on the table. "This is a DNA test," she said. "It proves that Clara is my daughter." Charles stared at her, his jaw tightening. "This again?" "Please," Maya said, her voice firm but steady. "Just read it." Mrs. Porter snatched the envelope first, pulling out the paper. She skimmed it, her expression shifting from irritation to disbelief. "This can't be right," she muttered. Charles took the document from her hand. He read it once, then again. His eyes widened slightly, his color draining. Silence. Then he sank slowly into his chair. "My God," he whispered. "This can't be—" "It's real," Maya said softly. "I didn't come here to accuse you. I came here to tell you the truth." Mrs. Porter shook her head. "This is absurd. Some kind of mistake." But before she could finish, the sound of small footsteps filled the hallway. Liam ran into the room, his face bright with sudden excitement. "I told you," he shouted, his words clear and strong. "She's alive." Maya turned, tears springing instantly to her eyes. He rushed toward her and threw his arms around her waist. She knelt, hugging him tightly. The room fell still. Charles looked from the paper in his hands to his son, and then to Maya, who was kneeling on the floor, trembling with emotion. For a moment he couldn't speak. Then his voice came out raw, unsteady. "My wife, Isabella." She always had doubts. She said something didn't feel right about the adoption. But the agency had all the right documents. Birth certificate, hospital forms. Everything looked perfect. Maya met his eyes. "Silver Meadows lied to you. They lied to everyone." Charles pressed a hand against his forehead, breathing hard. He looked like a man seeing ghosts. "I swear to you, Maya, if I had known—" "I believe you," she interrupted softly. "You loved her. You raised her. But she's mine. And she deserves to know who she really is." Tears welled in his eyes. The powerful businessman, always so composed, suddenly looked fragile. "I can't imagine what you've been through," he said. "I'm so sorry." Maya shook her head slowly. "Don't be sorry. Just help me tell her the truth." Mrs. Porter stood frozen in the corner, pale and silent now. She didn't speak another word. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of rain against the windows. Liam was still holding Maya's hand. "You found her," he whispered. Maya looked down at him, her eyes full. "No," she said softly. "You did." For a long time none of them moved. The air felt heavy with something deeper than grief. It was relief, release, the slow unwinding of years of buried truth. Charles finally spoke again, his voice barely audible. "She's in New York, studying. I'll tell her tonight." Maya nodded, tears spilling freely now. "Thank you." Charles folded the DNA result carefully, almost reverently. "She has a right to know," he said. "And so do you." Maya gave a faint, exhausted smile. "That's all I ever wanted." Liam climbed onto the couch beside her, resting his head against her arm. His small voice broke the silence again. "Family," he murmured. Charles met Maya's eyes, and for the first time since she'd entered his life, they understood each other, not as employer and servant, but as two people bound by the same child, the same truth. The mansion, once so cold and quiet, finally felt alive. 3 days later, the Whitmore mansion felt different, quieter, but not with emptiness, with anticipation. Charles had called Clara the same night Maya left. He'd told her everything, the DNA test, the agency, the truth. At first she thought it was some cruel mistake, but when he mentioned the photograph, the one with her pink ribbon and the faint scar above her eyebrow, she went silent. Now Clara was flying home. Maya hadn't slept. She spent every night pacing the small guest room Charles had offered her until Clara arrived. Her heart moved between terror and hope. What if Clara didn't believe her? What if she hated her for coming back? By mid-afternoon, the sound of a car echoed across the gravel driveway. Maya's heart jumped. Mrs. Porter opened the front door as Clara stepped out, tall, graceful, her long black hair catching the light drizzle. She paused at the doorway, scanning the hall like someone walking through a dream. Charles appeared first, offering a hesitant smile, but Clara's gaze went past him, toward the woman standing at the far end of the corridor. Maya. The two women froze. Neither spoke. Clara took a slow step forward, then another. Her eyes were locked on Maya's face, the shape of her jaw, the lines carved by years of grief, the familiar softness she couldn't explain. Maya swallowed hard, her throat tightening. Her hands trembled as she held out a faded photograph, a baby with a silver necklace and bright eyes. "This was you," she whispered. Clara's hand went to her neck. She touched the silver necklace she'd worn her whole life, the same one from the photo. Her eyes widened, her breath hitched. Maya's voice broke as she said, "Your name was Ella." The sound of that name, her real name, cracked something open inside Clara. The photograph slipped from her hand, landing softly on the carpet. She dropped to her knees. Maya did too. They met halfway, arms wrapping around each other like two halves of the same soul finally reuniting. Clara sobbed into Maya's shoulder, the kind of cry that had been building since birth. Maya held her tighter, shaking with silent tears. Charles stood nearby, head bowed. Liam watched from the staircase, his small hand gripping the railing. He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, and whispered the same word he'd said days before. Family. Time slowed. The mansion, once filled with silence, now pulsed with the sound of human hearts mending. When the tears finally eased, Clara pulled back just enough to look at Maya's face. "All my life," she whispered, "I felt like something was missing, like a part of me was somewhere I couldn't reach." Maya cupped her daughter's face, her voice gentle but sure. "You were never missing, sweetheart, just lost. And now you're home." Charles stepped forward, placing something small into Clara's palm. The silver necklace that had fallen during the reunion. "This always belonged to you," he said softly. Clara looked up at him with wet eyes. "You raised me," she said. "You loved me. That will never change." Charles nodded slowly. His voice was barely audible. "You deserve both truths." Maya reached for his hand briefly, a simple gesture of understanding. No blame, no anger, just quiet gratitude. That evening, after dinner, the house was bathed in a warm amber glow. Clara sat with Maya in the living room, the photo album open between them. Each page turned felt like stepping through time. "This one," Maya said, pointing to a picture of baby Ella in a blue blanket. "You loved this toy rabbit. You wouldn't sleep without it." Clara smiled through tears. "I wish I remembered." "You don't need to," Maya said softly. "You're here now. That's what matters." Liam wandered in, climbing up beside Maya. He rested his head on her lap, the same way he always had when words felt too hard. Maya smiled, stroking his hair. "You're the reason all this happened," she whispered. Liam looked up at her, eyes half-lidded. "You were the song," he murmured, barely audible. Maya blinked back fresh tears. "What did you say?" "You were the song that made everything better." For a long moment, Maya couldn't speak. She only held him tighter. Charles watched quietly from the doorway. When Maya's eyes met his, no words passed between them, only mutual understanding. He had lost a wife, found a truth, and witnessed a miracle he didn't deserve, but would spend his life honoring. Hours later, long after everyone had gone to bed, Maya sat alone in the dimly lit living room. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, the same element that had once destroyed her life now warming it. She looked around the room, the photographs, the books, the faint echoes of laughter drifting from the upstairs hall. Everything felt alive, full, whole. The sound of small footsteps made her turn. Clara appeared, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket. She knelt in front of Maya and whispered, "I couldn't sleep." Maya smiled gently. "Me neither." Clara hesitated, then said softly, "Can I stay here?" "Just for a while?" Maya opened her arms without a word. Clara nestled against her, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. The two sat together in silence, watching the flicker of the fire. For Maya, it wasn't just warmth. It was rebirth. The same fire that had once taken everything had now given her back what mattered most. She glanced down at her daughter, half asleep, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're home now," she whispered. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping gently against the wide windows, the same sound from that night 20 years ago. But this time the storm didn't sound like loss. It sounded like peace. Liam wandered in, eyes heavy with sleep, and curled up on the couch beside them. Charles appeared moments later, standing quietly in the doorway. He didn't speak, didn't move closer. He simply watched, his eyes reflecting the same firelight that glowed in Maya's. For the first time in decades, the mansion felt complete. The silence that once suffocated it had become something else. A sanctuary. Maya leaned her head back, eyes closed, holding both Clara and Liam close. Her heart finally rested. The past no longer hurt. It had healed. She whispered a final prayer, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. The fire crackled softly, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that stays, a fire that lives quietly in the heart, burning not to consume but to remind. Maya smiled faintly through her tears. "We're home," she said, almost to herself, and for the first time in 20 years, she truly was. And just like that, the fire that once destroyed everything became the light that reunited a family torn apart by fate. Maya found her peace, Clara found her truth, and the mansion that once echoed with silence finally breathed with love again. Some stories don't end in flames, they rise from them. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances.